Alrighty. Now, Figaro, Figaro, Figaro. I'm going to share my screen right away. So before I do that, I want to say hello, everybody. I'm glad that you guys are here today with me and Alan. You may know me as some other names on social media. You may know Alan as Alan. But anyways, as far as this presentation goes, me and Alan have decided to really show you guys off of what perspective is all about, because as far as this being a fundamental, or maybe for some of you guys that just missed this and have already are graduating, we really want to show off exactly what perspective means to us as an animation student or as a artist of some other different field, maybe cinematography. But look, I'm getting ahead of myself. So some of you guys are probably asking yourself, what does perspective mean to me? Or what is perspective? So as you can see, perspective, as you can see right now, is that it is the art of constructing the illusion of three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional surface. And as far as how that goes, by understanding and applying proportional height, width, and depth, along with a representational human scale, we have the opportunity to create representational and realistic spaces. Now, there are 5 terms to this, as you can see right over here, that qualifies these terms from height, width, depth, composition, and line. Or in any other order you can really see this out, because surely as disciplines treat this itself, it applies to like a majority of visual media fields. So as far as visual media fields or artistic disciplines, there are a variety of lists that qualify into animation, character design, environment, prop design, architecture, interior design, studio arts, cinematography, and especially photography. You get those wide enough streets that have an entire street view. And well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the thing about perspective, it gives you that quality assurance that it tells you, that it reminds you that it has a lot of applications it can go into. I could give you a lot more, but before we move forward, when you're getting into animation, and understand the concept of making backgrounds or any of those fields of variety, you probably want to ask yourself, where do I begin with this? So to begin, where you really want to go so far is to understand what is staging to you. Now, what is staging? Clearly, it can be defined as presenting an idea, so that is clear. It could be a thumbnail, it could be a painting, it could be an image you could take for reference. But whatever you have taken, in the matter of design, staging is arranging your composition to draw to the viewer to a main area of interest. Considering the backgrounds that you make so far, the BGs, the thumbnailing, you're trying to tell a story through this. But how do you construct that before you tell that as a story? Because clearly, the basic components of understanding perspective, we automatically think of perspective of just 3 original terms. Originally, we just go with the foreground, the midground, and the background. Now, to begin, the foreground is the nearest space closest to the spectator. Objects that appear close to you trend to appear the largest. Now, objects further away tend to be reduced in size. So it's obviously whatever is closest. The midground obviously is the area in between the foreground and background in the composition, while as the background is the furthest distance from the spectator, or in other words, just the background. But it's not necessarily that, because clearly we often have to ask ourselves, what exactly does this diagram have has such a commonality for us to really understand? What does it have than every other thing that we come to know about perspective? Alan, would you like to answer that?
Of course, Sebastian. Now, in regards to for all the foregrounds, midgrounds, and backgrounds, what they all relate to is having an eye level. Next slide. Now, what is the eye level? The eye level is an invisible horizon line that reflects infinite distance. The eye level directly correlates to the height of the observer, spectator, or camera. As we can come with an example, think of it as like a standing character will have a higher level, whereas the same character sitting down or crouching down would conversely have like a lower eye level. And next slide, please. Now, to to begin with our basic perspective system, let's start talking about with 1-point perspective. And for this rule, we start off with these 5 rules. For 1, you have one eye level that's near or to the center of the composition. 2, once the dominating vanishing point is on the eye level, at or the near the center of the composition. 3, have your vertical lines which are perpendicular to the eye level. 4, have your horizontal lines which are parallel to the eye level. And lastly, have your oblique lines converge to or from the vanishing point. Next slide. Now, when it comes to like these examples over here, as you work for in photography or drawing, like not only these relates to these constructionism, it can express our use of understanding like the eye level from outdoors environments or interior environments. Like an example, if you were to make a hallway or a living room, throne room perhaps, or even a conference room, anything that relates to the vanishing point to the center, it consists with a 1-point perspective to the basic principles that works with anything in the environment. Now, for our next step, for our perspective system, is we'll be moving to 2-point perspective. Some similar rules is that when we have 1, our eye level placed in or near to the center of the composition. 2, have 2 dominating vanishing points that's placed on the eye level, but outside of the composition. And we'll have to refer to the cone vision principle so we can get a proper placement for the 2 vanishing points. Next one is we have our vertical lines to our perpendicular to the eye level. And lastly, like our oblique lines must converge to like our respective vanishing points. Next slide, please. Now, for these examples of like a 2-point perspective, what makes a 2-point perspective is when you apply to these sets of rules by starting with both of these vanishing points. Like you'll be able, like when you like have your work on the eye level, it needs to be like at the center of the composition. And if you draw it such as like the side of the buildings, like it helps you creates like the 3rd dimension. And as noted, as Sebastian's notes over here, so basically on this eye level, like we must have like our vanishing points that are outside the composition. And when we have our dominant like vanishing points onto the side, this helps us like to create the oblique lines, like a direction of where they go to, such as these corners are from these like doorways or balconies, or like even right at the end of the very corner end, like each oblique line to any of these are correlating to these vanishing points. And as for anything that's any vertical lines that stand still remains in place.
And as far as this entire thing goes with oblique lines as well, you must always have your vanishing points reference outside of the composition, considering how when it comes down to just exterior designs, this doesn't just only apply to just only outsides. It could work as a guide for outsides or 3/4 of dimensions to see how you actually have this as your front or side. This 2-point perspective is exactly the kind of technique, the type of principle that you will be seeing a lot more in use whenever you're drawing backgrounds that require an entire street area, or as well as, let me see if I can get to the next.
As we next to the point to the next slide, as we continue forward, most importantly, when we have our like eye levels in the composition, whether if it is an exterior of an environment or this interior of an environment, we must keep in mind that our eye levels in 2-point perspective must stay like in the center of the composition. Any like a movement, like any like eye movements that's out of it, like would like distort the image.
Because as far as that goes, other than 1-point perspective or hold on 1 second. I'm sorry, I need to scroll back up. 1-point perspective or 2-point perspective, what most perspectives will have in the advancement of progressing through this, you're often going to be bringing yourself out to the concept of 3-point perspective. So what you have here, there are 4 rules that constitute the concept of 3-point perspective, because what you have over here is, for the first rule, you have one eye level which must be placed outside the composition, either above or below, depending on whether it's an upshot or a downshot. Never to have your eye level within the composition for upshots or downshots, while the second rule constitutes 2 dominating vanishing points must be placed on each side of the eye level and outside of the composition. So you must refer to the cone of vision principle for the proper placement of the 2 VPs. And we'll get to this example because this is going to be pretty damn good. So third rule, a third VP placed 90 degrees on a vertical line from the center of the composition. For an upshot, the VP will be placed above the eye level and outside the composition. For a downshot, the opposite. The VP will be placed below the eye level and outside the composition. So you must refer to the cone of vision principle for the proper placement of the third VPs for oblique lines that converge to or from the respective vanishing points. Has to be into these rules as well. In order for this to work, again, oblique lines are a thing. So here are 2 examples that we have so far to constitute this entire concept. So what you have over here is a downshot a downshot over to the left of this example. So this is a 3-point perspective. You have one vanishing point right here at 45 degrees, another at the other 45, and you must make a 90-degree down over on the third VP that's supposed to be right outside the composition. But the only thing about this composition is that it is directly inside this entire area from which you're giving yourself the grid to give yourself the use of making these oblique lines altogether. Now that while you have the stage altogether, the eye level must not be inside the composition in order to qualify this to work. Because the placement of this field within the cone of vision, that's this entire circle right over here, and we'll get to it more, that the placement of this cone of vision would result in a double downshot because it's closer to the eye level, especially when you're having an entire street corner that is drawn out this way. And that's what's really amazing about 3-point perspective in this regard. While in the upshot example, where the vanishing point is placed right up here, you already have one VP on the left side where the other VP is on the opposite. But again, when you're doing upshots, you must have the eye level, this entire eye level, way above the entire composition stage front from which you're actually putting together your entire stage. So as far as oblique lines go, they correlate with the one vanishing point as the other correlates with this side. So considering how this placement of this field must remain again within this entire cone of vision. This entire green circle, as you see, is your cone of vision, because you also need to understand that, note that in 3-point perspective, the eye level must never be inside the composition again. So moving on. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what the heck is the cone of vision? What does this got to do with my form of perspective? Well, I'll tell you, my friend. The cone of vision represents the area within a person's field of view that is undistorted. And I must express, each healthy human eye has the ability to see 30 degrees with the accuracy. Combined, both eyes can see clearly within 60 degrees of that circle, which is referred to as the cone of vision. Objects that fall outside of that cone will appear to be distorted. To consider the plan view. This diagram right here is a good example of how we understand the aspect of the cone of vision. The plan view is a top view looking down on the subject, from where plan views are flat views that are void of depth and dimension. They're what you would imagine when you're looking at an architectural blueprint of a house. So what you have right over here, and I'm going to annotate again, is that you have these entire 2 points that constitute the 30-degree left angle, this entire side, while the 30-degree right angle constitutes this entire side. But outside of that, whatever's blur outside of your entire eyesight is the vanishing point that's outside of this entire view. This makes up about 60 degrees, while outside of your entire view stretches out the blurred areas of vision from 45 degrees from the right to 45 degrees on the left. They both have vanishing points that correlate towards you, the spectator, you looking at whatever is as the subject. Whatever is close could remain as just 30 degrees right over here. But this entire area composes of 60 degrees because this entire area is where the eye level rests. Now, as again, this is the top view. Moving forward, when it comes down to perspectives like the first 1-point perspective, 2-point perspectives, 3-point perspectives, I mean, the basic principles that we have just went through, you're probably asking yourself, is that all there is to perspective technique so far? No, there's like a variety of them, but I'm going to give you one of the best ones there is, because the most elaborative so far is the technique consisting of 3 or more vanishing points, each placed on an eye level. So in this example, for this warped perspective, now we're getting into warped perspectives, mind you, this is called a horizontal banana pan. In this example, the artist is using 3 vanishing points, one at the center, like I'm going to annotate again, one at the center, while there is 2 flanking VPs that go around right over here. But they each have their own point. They have their own point perspectives and their own 5 forms. Now, this type of distorted drawing is typically used by storyboard artists to infer a transition from one perspective to another, in this case, from left to right. So left to right. Now, in this case, from left to right, you have that as 1 point right over here. When we're going left, we have a 2-point perspective because you have at least these 2 VPs right outside this main composition right over here. That qualifies as one entire 2-point perspective plane right over here. The third one, when we're going at the center, is 1-point perspective. You can see little Billy walking up to the door to see his aunt. That's a story to tell for this 1-point perspective. Then again, we go back over here. That's another area that we can use for 2-point perspectives. And then in this area right here, down the street right over here, that could be for 1-point perspective again. So these horizontal pans can be used from like right to left if you're ever going to make an entire pan configuration. So a pan configuration is probably something that they're going to teach you about in storyboard programs, from where you're going to have the entire camera view go from here to pan over here. It could be an entire running scene of a single actor running down the entire sidewalk in order to reach the other side. And that's what's really good about this entire horizontal banana pan. And golly, it's beautiful. Now, moving on, there was another warp perspective I'd love to teach you guys, and it's called 5-point fisheye perspective. To put it simply, it is a technique using a total of 5 vanishing points. For one rule, it's 1 eye level in the middle of the composition, 3 VPs placed on the eye level, 1 on the far left side, 1 in the middle, and 1 on the other far right side, while the third rule constitutes 1 VP placed 90 degrees directly above the center of the VP, as well as the opposite for 1 VP placed 90 degrees below the center of the VP. Together, the 4 VPs placed outside from the center of the VP should align with the circle as a circle. And to better elaborate this, I will show you what it simply looks like. What it entirely does is it gives us an entire world view from which we start from 1 VP at the center, put 2 VPs on opposite ends of the eye level. This is your eye level, remember. And while we have 90 degrees facing evenly upward to 1 VP on top of here, as well as another VP down below right over here. In this diagram, we have our own fisheye view, which could be staged for a matter of almost the same reasons as we did with the banana pan perspective. It could be one stage that sets one person or our character setting over, walking down this entire street, and then we pan over to reach out to the other side. But designing these 5-point perspective examples, it could be used for an entire rooftop view. It doesn't have to be from this elevation, but it can be constructed down to like at least a lower elevation at least. But the point is, the point is the point is when you're actually having these entire 5-point perspectives, you're giving yourself the use to correlate as well with these entire VPs. I never tried this myself, but I really want to really look into this in the near future. So moving on, I'm going to give the wheel to Alan Barooni so he can show us auxiliary vanishing points. And let me clear this up. It doesn't look like a football field plan. So
Thank you,
take it
Sebastian.
away.
Now, thank you, Sebastian. Now for these new additional steps for these steps, this technique involves like using additional vanishing points called auxiliary vanishing points, in which is placed like a vertically 90 degrees above or below the vanishing points, depending on the direction of the slope. Like this technique can help you create like ramps, as shown like in our upcoming slides, staircases, roofs, awnings, or any level surfaces like the plane does not like coverage on the eye level. Next slide, please. Now, for this example of like for auxiliary vanishing points, here we have like a 1-point perspective of showing like these ramps up to the wall. Now, the idea in like this technique is that, say that you're trying to make a box like as usual, and each oblique line that goes like with the vanishing point. Now the next step for like this like auxiliary vanishing point is just to place a new like auxiliary vanishing point that's above like a 90 degrees from the vanishing point. Right in the same area of the vanishing point is where we can determine like where auxiliary vanishing point is towards, so thus we can create the edges that we want to make. Next slide, please. Now, as far as like a auxiliary vanishing point goes, when you want to create like a ramp, you would want to like place a vanishing point like in the 90 degree above, like from the eye level, or in this example for now, as such as a house. Now, when we want to make like a house, first thing we want to do is like we make our boxes that like that correlates the 2 vanishing points outside for that side.
So in other words, whenever we're drawing out the entire form of our concept for our 2-point perspective, again, what we're actually doing right over here is drawing our entire form as Alan is actually presenting. So again, as always, you must, while you're applying to the rules of 2-point perspective, you definitely need to converge onto these lines that converge to each of their vanishing points. But what the oblique lines are showing us is that a majority of the time, whenever we're drawing an entire shape, we need to draw what's behind it. Usually, whenever we're creating houses or whenever we're creating like entire roof concepts, what Alan is showing us is that he's not just showing us an entire front side of it, but he's showing us an entire back side of it as well. This is a rough idea that we have right here over this as we're walking this through you. So whenever you're drawing the forms, you're absolutely needed and required to draw what's behind it as well as what's in front of it. Most pre-production studies must require you to draw what's behind of it if you're ever going to break this down for a front or back design.
And like as Sebastian was saying, yes, like for any forms that we make, whether we make like a rooftop for our homes or awnings, it is most important to like be sure to have like our surfaces from front to back so that we can like make our objects and oblique lines with correct precision. And let me clear this for our next slide.
Okay. I got the next one.
And for these auxiliary vanishing points, now what's very useful is in this technique is that when you want to make your environments or any environments that involves like a staircases, these auxiliary vanishing points really help you to define where the auxiliary vanishing point takes place to get the precise slope that you need to get the correct amount of levels for your auxiliary vanishing points. And if you like to take the wheel, Sebastian.
As well as you're trying to make these entire the entire use out of hold on, I'm going to change to a different color, that these entire uses take from an entire vanishing point that is outside of this entire composition. For now, let's just say this entire thing is our composition. You also need to realize that when you're making an entire 1-point perspective with this one down, you must always, and I mean always, have your oblique line start from your original vanishing point of this 1-point perspective, while the vertical vanishing point, anywhere that you place it, and I know the red, it can be like confusing right now. Let me switch to a different color. Now, whenever that you're constructing an entire staircase, you must at least have these entire things correlate with each of these stairs as well. When you're drawing this entire thing down to just this, each edge is going to need its own lines, its own box lines, in order to like make the next one or the next staircase with its front panel stand out rather more. So, but however, other than 1-point perspective method, 2-point perspective can be used in its own 2 different ways. It can give you a variety of like having an entire angle from where the staircase correlates just with one vanishing point. But again, you must always consider that these 2-point perspectives must always give yourself the use to construct them the way that they need to, from which they have their own entire form. They must correlate, as you can see. And sometimes whenever you're creating your entire staircase like this, or a front view, for instance, it could be done the most oppositely. I don't know if I can really do this on here though, but the idea of this one is something that you really need to like work into. Now, I haven't even done auxiliary vanishing points, but another thing that you need to give yourself to understand is that you also need a character scale model that must be aligned next to an entire black line, or an entire concept of which that gives you a character to give as a reference to any perspective background. Now, this is a character model right over here. That's your C model. But again, with the lines right over here, they must, and I mean they must, as always, character scale must be next to the stairs and aligned with the black line. And I'm talking about the black line that's like already over here, drawn over this, or under it, as we can see. Yes, because they must align with the actual steps, like the pour of the shoes, to the top of the head. And that gives us our entire reference of which we must follow. So that concludes it. Now, any questions? Sarahi?
Sarina?
Hi. I just want to say, like, I had no knowledge of the 5-point perspective, the fisheye perspective. So it was like really helpful to like learn how that worked when you showed like the graph on how, and like not the graph, but like the image and how which point goes where. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is actually really, really helpful. And I like just wanted to thank you guys for, doing this basically.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Anytime. We're really glad to show this off. I mean, considering how perspective is a mandatory concept that we really want to teach others, it is something that I believe that everybody can use. Everybody can really use these concepts of perspective in order to fill out for precise backgrounds, the precise study of understanding hallways or understandings of character designs, because you're also going to be needing those guides in the future from how you construct different varieties of street designs, or especially if you want to go crazy with the warp perspectives, because that's the one thing that storyboarders these days are absolutely bar biting for.
And if I like to add as well, like when it comes to like a warp perspective, the idea is that when you have the whole setup, like whether it's the warp's banana pen or the 5-point perspective, the idea is that you have a whole map like for like the animators, and the idea is that you have like your little thumbnails like to pinpoint where's the camera pointing towards, and that helps you give the illusion of this like open free space of the environment.
Any more questions?
Oh, thank you so much, by the way.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for joining us here.
Mhm.
Okay. Any questions from anyone else?
Don't be shy.
Well, if not, there's one thing I want to leave you guys with. I'm gonna see if I can look up the classes that are needed at the moment for this. If you really want to get it into perspective and you still believe that you can go for it, go for a practice like this, you can always check out for this low level class of perspective 230 to really start you up. But if you really want to get serious with this pre-production, Alan, do you know the number for pre-production class? It's 324B, right?
Let me take a one.
Yeah. So, without further ado, I think we will give this back to Marcelo at the moment. And
All
thank
right.
you again, everybody.
And thank you for joining us.